But first up, the carpet bombing of regional Australia with massive wind turbines and hectares of farmland covered with solar panels, plus huge transmission lines being ploughed through productive farmland, state forests and national parks, is causing huge interest in regional Australia. Now, recently, Peter Credlin on this program returned to her hometown of Witcherproof in Victoria's Mallee Country and aired the fears of locals on renewable energy companies backed by state and federal Labor governments bullying them. And there is no other word for it, bullying them to host transmission lines on their properties and tried to seduce them to host turbines and solar panels. Now, city living Australians largely have zero knowledge of what's actually happening out in the bush in these communities. I've talked about it before, and protest groups are growing around the country and even include coastal communities on New South Wales coastline. They're protesting about offshore wind turbines. Now, this is all being driven by a Renewables zealot in the Minister Chris Bowen, who for some reason has been able to convince people like the Prime Minister that Australia must rewire the entire nation to meet a set of climate targets signed up to in Paris. Now, as I've said before, this is complete madness. Australia is rich in gas and coal, and we should have some of the world's cheapest energy. But instead, power prices continue to go up. Just yesterday, the boss of mining giant Woodside Energy, Meg O'Neill, at a speech in Melbourne, warned that Victoria was about to have a winter gas shortfall after 10 years of demonising gas.
Our ability to come to the rescue on those cold days in winter or the hot days when people need the AC is becoming reduced year and year. So look, I'm very worried about Victoria.
Now, the fools that run energy policy in that state have even legislated no new homes be allowed to connect to stovetops or water heaters and to put gas into their properties in future. And if your hot water system breaks down, guess what? You're going to be forced to replace it with an electric one at your cost. Now, is that because they too believe Victoria's about to run out of gas? No, it's part of their blind, obsessive hate of fossil fuels like coal and gas. Now, as O'Neill pointed out, and this is a direct quote, ideology has stood in the way of sensible energy investment. She says her company is wary of investing in that state because of political scepticism. And guess what? It seems Victoria sits on top of huge reserves of natural gas, but is close to being forced, you won't believe this, to import LNG at a massive cost. Now, how dumb is that? And meanwhile, out in the real world, guess what's happening with those wind turbines forced on regional Australia? Well, they are not only falling over, they are shedding dangerous shards of metal. Now, last weekend on Sunday, there was a series of thunderstorms across Western Victoria and through the city. They were loud, there was lots of lightning and some strong winds, but nothing really out of the ordinary. Then on Tuesday, at a renewable wind farm called Berrybank, north of the town of Colac, a 112-metre high turbine fell over. It collapsed. Now, this is caused by the other 25 wind towers to then be turned off. Now, I checked out this place called Berrybank. Don't you love it? They always give these joints fairy tale-like names. Berrybank, I checked out, and I was surprised to learn it sits on 5,000 hectares of farmland. It's been there since only 2022. And already these things are falling over. And just recently at the nearby Golden Plains wind farm, a worker tragically was killed when a blade crushed him to death. Now, we'll talk with the local member, Richard Reardon, who has called on the Premier to conduct a statewide audit of as many of these towers as possible and where they're located. And this is not a problem confined to Victoria. It's a nationwide scandal. And all we get from the Albanese government is scare campaigns about nuclear energy. All this gives voters at the federal election, whenever that might be, a very clear choice between using the bountiful resources we have for cheap and, most importantly, reliable energy, or the dangerous green dream of Chris Bowen.